In the middle of the Indian Ocean lies Tromelin Island, a place of mystery, survival, and forgotten history. Today, we uncover the incredible story of how people endured against all odds. In the vast deep blue of the Indian Ocean, there lies a tiny speck of land. This is Tromelin Island. It is a place so small, you could walk from one side to the other in less than half an hour. It is low and flat, a mere sliver of coral and sand that barely rises above the powerful waves. For centuries, it was a place known only to the wind and the sea. The nearest large landmass, Madagascar, is hundreds of kilometers away. This isolation made it a perfect home for seabirds who came in their thousands to nest, safe from the dangers of larger lands. It was a world unto itself, a private kingdom ruled by the cycles of sun and tide. Imagine this island, surrounded by an endless expanse of water. It is a remote sanctuary, a haven for life that thrives in solitude. The air would have been filled with the constant calls of birds. The sky would have been a moving tapestry of wings, as parents flew out to sea to find food for their hungry chicks. The ground itself would have been a bustling nursery, covered with nests and downy young. The island was a powerhouse of life, a vibrant and noisy community of feathered inhabitants. It was a place teeming with the energy of new generations, all dependent on the bounty of the surrounding ocean and the safety of their isolated home. The island's very existence is a marvel of nature. It was built over millennia by tiny coral creatures, their skeletons slowly forming a reef that eventually broke the surface of the water. Sand carried by the currents gathered upon this foundation, creating the land we see today. Low-lying shrubs and hardy grasses took root, their seeds brought by wind or passing birds. These plants helped to hold the fragile island together, providing shelter and nesting material. It was a simple ecosystem, but a perfectly balanced one. Life here was harsh, shaped by the sun and the salt, but it was also incredibly resilient and full of vigor. Today, on this 7th day of September in the year 2025, we can look at Tromelin and see a story of both profound loss and incredible recovery. Its history is a powerful reminder of how delicate these natural worlds are. It shows us how easily a paradise can be lost, but it also reveals something truly wonderful: nature's remarkable ability to heal if only we give it a chance. The story of Tromelin Island is not just about birds and sand. It is a story about consequences, responsibility, and the enduring power of hope. It is a lesson written on a tiny canvas in the middle of a great ocean. Our story takes a dark turn in the year 1761. A French ship, the Utile, was sailing these waters. It was not on a mission of exploration or trade in goods. It was a slave ship engaged in an illegal and cruel business. On board, crammed into the dark and miserable hold, were more than 150 men, women, and children. They had been kidnapped from their homes in Madagascar, destined for a life of forced labor on the sugar plantations of Mauritius. Their journey across the sea was already one of terror and despair, but a far worse fate was about to befall them. The ship's crew, navigating with imperfect maps and instruments, made a terrible mistake. During a storm, in the dead of night, the Utile struck the hidden reefs of Tromelin Island. The sound of splintering wood was followed by the roar of the ocean as it tore the vessel apart. Panic and chaos erupted on the doomed ship. In the confusion, many people, both crew and the captive Malagasy people, were washed into the violent sea. The shipwreck was a catastrophe, a sudden and brutal end to a wretched voyage. The survivors, both French sailors and Malagasy captives, found themselves stranded on a desolate shore. When the sun rose, the survivors saw the full extent of their predicament. They were marooned on a tiny barren island with no fresh water and very little shelter. What was left of their ship was a wreck upon the reef. The French crew, about 20 sailors, immediately asserted their authority. They saw the 80 surviving Malagasy people not as fellow castaways, but as their property. The sailors promised the Malagasy people that they would build a new boat to rescue everyone, but it was a promise they did not intend to keep for all. It was a grim beginning to a long and harrowing ordeal. The sailors scavenged materials from the wrecked Utile and began to construct a smaller vessel, a raft they called the Providence. After 2 long months of hard work, the raft was ready. The French crew boarded their makeshift boat, taking with them all the remaining supplies. They left the Malagasy people behind. They promised to send a ship back for them. A final, cruel deception. As the Providence disappeared over the horizon, the 80 men and women from Madagascar were left utterly alone, abandoned on a speck of sand in the middle of the vast, empty ocean. The abandoned Malagasy people faced an almost impossible challenge. They were alone on an island with no trees for building and no natural source of fresh water. The promises of their captors had faded with the departing sail, leaving only the sound of the wind and waves. But these were resourceful and resilient people. They did not give in to despair. Their first and most urgent task was to find water. They discovered that by digging deep into the sand, they could reach a layer of brackish but drinkable water. This simple discovery was the key to their immediate survival, a lifeline on their desolate new home. Using their ingenuity, they began to build a new life for themselves. They salvaged what they could from the shipwreck. They used coral blocks, cemented together with the ash from burnt seaweed, to build sturdy shelters that could withstand the powerful winds of ocean storms. They even managed to keep a fire burning, a precious flame they had saved from the wreck, which they tended constantly for years. This fire was the heart of their small community, providing warmth, a means to cook, and a beacon of hope in the long nights. They lived off the island's bounty, seabirds, turtles, and their eggs. As months turned into years, their hope of rescue must have begun to fade. Yet, they held on. They looked to the horizon every day, searching for the sight of a sail. They passed the time by working, by maintaining their small community, and by remembering their homeland. They were a people stolen from their lives, shipwrecked and then abandoned. Yet on this tiny island, they demonstrated incredible strength and perseverance. They survived where many would have perished, creating a society in the most unlikely of places. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable hardship. For 15 long years, they waited. The French authorities knew of their plight. The crew of the Providence had made it to safety and reported the situation. But rescue was never sent. It was only in 1776 that a ship, commanded by a man named Bernard Boudin de Tromelin, finally arrived. He found only 7 women and an 8-month-old baby, the first child born and raised on the island. The others had perished over the long, difficult years. These 8 survivors were finally taken from the island that had been their prison. In their honor, the island was renamed Tromelin, a permanent reminder of their incredible and tragic story of survival. The shipwreck of the Utile left behind more than just a tragic human story. It also brought new inhabitants to the island, small and unseen stowaways that would change the course of its natural history forever. These were rats. Escaping the sinking ship, they swam to the shore and found a new home. For these creatures, the island was a paradise. There were no predators to hunt them, no larger animals to compete with. They were free to multiply without check, and their population exploded across the tiny landmass. They were an invasive species, an alien presence in a world not equipped to handle them. Before the rats arrived, Tromelin was a seabird metropolis. At least 8 different species of birds nested here in enormous colonies. The ground was a mosaic of eggs and chicks, a noisy, bustling nursery that stretched from shore to shore. The birds had chosen this island precisely because it was safe. There were no land-based hunters to threaten their vulnerable young. For thousands of years, this system had worked perfectly. The birds could lay their eggs on the open ground, confident that they would be safe until they hatched. This idyllic balance was about to be shattered by the new arrivals. The rats were relentless and efficient predators. They swarmed through the bird colonies, their small size allowing them to go anywhere. They consumed the eggs, which were an easy and abundant source of food. They also preyed upon the small, defenseless chicks, which had no natural fear of such a creature and no way to escape. For the birds, it was a disaster on an unimaginable scale. An entire generation of young could be wiped out in a matter of days. The very thing that had made the island a sanctuary, the absence of ground predators, now made it a death trap. The impact was swift and devastating. The constant predation meant that very few young birds survived to adulthood. The great colonies began to shrink. Species that were smaller or nested directly on the ground were the most vulnerable. One by one, they vanished from the island. The air that was once thick with the calls of thousands of birds grew quieter. The bustling nurseries fell silent. The rats, brought by a single tragic event, had triggered an ecological catastrophe. They had broken the ancient rhythm of the island, replacing a world of abundance with one of silence and decline. The years following the shipwreck saw a profound and terrible transformation on Tromelin Island. The unseen invasion of rats continued its destructive work season after season. By the dawn of the 21st century, the island was a shadow of its former self. Where once there had been a vibrant chorus of at least 8 different seabird species, there were now only two. The masked boobies and the red-footed boobies had managed to cling to existence here. They were larger birds, better able to defend their nests, or they nested in shrubs, giving them a slight advantage over the ground-dwelling rats. But even their numbers had dwindled significantly. The ecological devastation was almost total. The once thriving populations of terns and noddies were gone completely. These smaller, more delicate birds had no defense against the relentless tide of rats. Their breeding colonies, which had likely numbered in the tens of thousands, had been wiped out entirely. The last documented record of them breeding on the island was from the mid-19th century. After that, silence. The island that had been a vital nursery for the seabirds of the Indian Ocean had become a barren outpost. Its primary purpose in the great web of life extinguished by the voracious appetite of the invaders. Imagine walking across the island in the early 2000s. The sense of loss would have been overwhelming. You would see the remnants of a once great bird city, but now it would be largely empty. The sky, which should have been filled with circling birds, would have been quiet. The ground, which should have been covered in nests, would be bare sand and sparse vegetation. The only signs of animal life in abundance would be the rats themselves scurrying through the undergrowth. The island's very soul, its vibrant, noisy, life-giving character, had been stolen. It was a silent monument to ecological collapse. This sad state of affairs continued for more than 200 years. The memory of what the island once was had faded, known only through old sailors' logs and scientific records. For generations, Tromelin was simply known as a rat-infested rock, a place of tragedy and loss. The human story of the castaways was a poignant memory, but the ecological story was an ongoing disaster. The island was stuck in a state of arrested development, its natural potential choked off by the legacy of a single shipwreck so long ago. It seemed as if the island's vibrant past was lost forever. By the beginning of the 21st century, a new understanding was dawning in the world of conservation. Scientists recognized that many of the world's islands had been devastated by invasive species, just like Tromelin. But they also realized something incredibly hopeful. If these invaders could be removed, there was a chance that the native wildlife could recover. An ambitious and bold idea began to take shape. What if it were possible to turn back the clock on Tromelin? What if the rats, the source of all the destruction, could be completely eliminated from the island? In 2005, this idea turned into action. A team of scientists and conservation experts, supported by the French authorities, landed on Tromelin. Their mission was clear and incredibly challenging: to eradicate every single rat from the 1 square kilometer island. It was a task that required meticulous planning and execution. Any mistake, any single surviving rat would mean failure, as the population could quickly rebound. The team chose to use poisoned bait, a method that had been used successfully on other islands around the world. It was a difficult decision, but it was the only viable option to save the island's ecosystem. The operation was a month-long campaign of careful and systematic work. The team spread the bait across the entire island, ensuring that every territory was covered. They had to reach every corner, every burrow, every hiding place where a rat might be. They worked tirelessly, battling the heat and the wind, driven by the hope of what the island could become. It was a delicate and nerve-wracking process. They had to be certain that their methods would not harm the remaining native booby populations. Finally, after weeks of intensive effort, the work was done. The last rat on Tromelin Island was gone. After the team departed, an anxious quiet fell over the island. Had they succeeded? The only way to know for sure was to wait and watch. The immediate aftermath was one of emptiness. The poisoned bait had worked, and the scurrying sound of the rats was no more. For the first time in over 2 centuries, the island was free from its alien predators. The stage was now set for one of the most remarkable comebacks in the natural world. The question on everyone's mind was simple: with the rats gone, would the birds return? The island did not have to wait long for an answer. The change began subtly at first, but soon it became a magnificent flood of life. The 2 species that had managed to hold on, the masked and red-footed boobies, were the first to respond. Freed from the constant pressure of rats preying on their eggs and chicks, their breeding success soared. More and more young birds survived to fledge and take to the skies. By 2013, less than a decade after the rats were removed, the populations of both booby species had more than doubled. The island was beginning to find its voice again. But the truly astonishing part of the story was the return of the lost ones. Birds that had not been seen breeding on the island for over 150 years began to reappear. White terns, elegant and ghostly pale, were among the first to arrive. Soon after came the brown noddies and their cousins, the lesser noddies. Then a great cloud of sooty terns descended upon the island, their dark wings filling the sky. For the first time since the 1850s, the calls of these birds echoed across the sands of Tromelin. They were coming home. The recovery happened entirely on its own. The conservation team had only removed the rats. They did not plant new vegetation or use decoys to attract the birds. Nature, once freed from its burden, did the rest. The birds, circling over the vast Indian Ocean, must have sensed the change. Perhaps they saw the growing colonies of boobies, a signal that this was once again a safe place to raise a family. Whatever the reason, they came. The island was acting like a magnet, pulling in life from the surrounding sea, reclaiming its ancient role as a seabird sanctuary. Even more remarkable was the arrival of a species that had never been recorded breeding on the island before, the wedge-tailed shearwater. These incredible birds spend most of their lives at sea and come to land only to nest in burrows. Their arrival was a powerful sign that the island's recovery was not just a return to the past, but the beginning of a new and even richer future. The silent island was now a symphony of life, a bustling, noisy and wonderfully chaotic city of birds. The restoration had been a spectacular success. Today, Tromelin Island is transformed. It is no longer a silent monument to loss, but a vibrant testament to the power of restoration. What was once a near-empty landscape is now a thriving sanctuary, home to one of the most important seabird colonies in the western Indian Ocean. 7 different species now breed here, their numbers climbing into the tens of thousands of pairs. The air is thick with wings and the constant, joyful noise of a healthy ecosystem. The ground is once again a vast nursery, carefully navigated by parent birds tending to their precious young. Life has returned with an astonishing force. The recovery of the birds has had a wonderful effect on the entire island. The droppings from thousands of birds, known as guano, act as a powerful fertilizer. This has enriched the poor sandy soil, allowing the native vegetation to flourish. The island is greener and more lush than it has been in centuries. This, in turn, provides more cover and better nesting sites for the birds. A virtuous cycle has been created, where the birds enrich the island, and the enriched island supports even more birds. The entire ecosystem is healing itself, growing stronger and more resilient with each passing year. The success on Tromelin is a beacon of hope. What happened here is not an isolated miracle. Around the world, there are thousands of islands that have been similarly devastated by invasive species like rats, cats, and goats. These islands are critical hotspots of biodiversity, home to unique species found nowhere else on Earth. The lessons learned on Tromelin, that complete removal of invasive species is possible and that nature can recover with breathtaking speed, are now being applied in many other places. Each successful restoration project is another step towards healing our planet. Looking at Tromelin today, on this day in 2025, we see more than just a successful conservation project. We see the result of a choice. We see what happens when people decide to right a past wrong, to intervene not to exploit, but to heal. The island's story, which began with the human tragedy of the Utile, has come full circle. It is now a story of human responsibility and natural resilience. The 8 survivors who were rescued so long ago would surely not recognize their island prison today. It has been reborn as a paradise, a true sanctuary for the wild. The story of Tromelin Island is far more than the tale of one small remote piece of land. It is a powerful lesson for all of humanity as we face the challenge of protecting our natural world. It teaches us first and foremost about the devastating impact that a single action can have. The arrival of rats from one shipwreck was enough to silence an entire ecosystem for 2 centuries. This is a stark reminder of how fragile island worlds are and how careful we must be. Our actions, even unintentional ones, can have consequences that ripple through time for generations. Secondly, Tromelin shows us that even catastrophic damage is not always permanent. It offers a profound message of hope. For over 200 years, the island was broken. Its natural purpose was lost. Yet with one decisive, well-planned intervention, the path to recovery was opened. This demonstrates that we are not powerless. We have the knowledge and the ability to undo some of the harm that has been done. The restoration of Tromelin proves that positive change is possible, even in places that seem lost forever. It encourages us to be bold and ambitious in our efforts to heal the planet. The speed and completeness of the island's recovery teach us another vital lesson: the immense power of nature's own resilience. The conservationists did not need to reintroduce every bird species one by one. They simply had to remove the obstacle that was holding nature back. Once the rats were gone, the birds returned on their own. This tells us that often, the best thing we can do for the environment is to step back and let it heal itself. Our role is to be responsible stewards, to remove the pressures we have created, and then to watch in wonder as life returns. Finally, the story of Tromelin is a call to action. There are hundreds of other islands like it, unique ecosystems teetering on the brink of collapse due to invasive species. These places are arks, protecting some of the rarest and most wonderful creatures on Earth. The success on Tromelin and in similar projects worldwide provides a clear blueprint for what we can achieve. By focusing our efforts on these critical island habitats, we can secure a future for countless species and restore vibrant hubs of life to our oceans. The lonely island of Tromelin has given us a map, and it is up to us to follow it.